Let's get into it, Max. Derek Carr has officially retired from the NFL due to a pretty major shoulder injury that he suffered against the Giants last year, late in the season. In Carr fashion, trying to do too much, I would break it down as. But what are your thoughts on Derek Carr, Max? What was your thoughts on the whole thing?
Well, I think it's crazy to think 3 year was it his 3rd year with the Saints, or is this his 2nd year with the Saints?
I think he only had two. That's it. He only had 2 years.
Yeah, it's
Or
crazy to
one.
think
I think
2
he had one. I think he only had
no,
one.
2, 2, 2,
Two?
2,
Okay.
2, 2, 2. Because last year, who was your guys' quarterback for the Raiders?
Last year it was Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell.
No, but before that, it was Aiden O'Connell, right?
And
O'Connell was
yeah,
RG.
that's it. I'm
And
telling
Jimmy
you.
G. And Jimmy G. He was Jimmy G. Yeah.
Okay,
So it's
okay.
2 years. 2
Yeah, two
years
years,
and
2 years.
I think it's crazy to think 2 years ago, this guy left Las Vegas, Oakland, Raiders, whatever, and there was a lot of high expectations, and I think a lot of people were kind of excited and thought, "Oh, man, now the Raiders aren't ruining this guy," and I think it's a little shocking to hear him retire in 2 years, but I think he's got a lot of wear and tear, and I think it's time, and I think his career brings up more interesting discussions in terms of this is what happens when you have a guy who looks like the guy, but isn't necessarily the guy. And I know that's not fair because, Derek Carr arguably could have been the MVP of a season one year. Argue before he broke his leg in week 15 against the Colts. Colts was it?
Colts. Yeah. Trent Cole.
My goat. I think that's something I want to talk about a little bit more after I hear your thoughts on it because, this is your guy. This is
Yeah.
the best quarterback you've known your lifetime. A Raiders legend, would you say?
Look, man, I'm just gonna say, like, I'm not that shocked that he retired. I'm really not. I think Carr, as much as people want to say that he wasn't tough and stuff, like I know Derek Carr has a lot of like memes out there of like him crying after hits and stuff, and oh, he's not a tough guy. I think that's BS. I think he's a really tough guy. He plays through a lot of injuries, and it's not surprising that his career is gonna end due to an injury. Um, Look, I was sad. I was sad when I heard him retire, man, because Carr is one of my favorite Raiders of all time. As much as he did lose in Vegas slash Oakland, he brought me and Raider Nation a bunch of memories, bro, that I'm never gonna forget. I'm 30 years old. I've never witnessed, as far as when I can comprehend football. I'm not gonna count the 2002 year from the Raiders because I was 7 years old. I couldn't comprehend football as well as I could in my later years. So, as far as I know, the Raiders have been the laughing stock of the league, the punching bag of the league, and known for losing. Okay. And when Derek Carr got drafted by the Raiders, along with Khalil Mack, it brought a whole new energy. It brought a whole new face and just a guy that represented the Raiders and was proud of it. It wasn't one of these guys that were coming for money, that was coming with a different agenda at the end of his career. This
Yeah.
was a guy who repped Oakland. He repped the Raiders full in and full out. Like, to the fullest, bro. And I respect Carr for that because Carr, at the end of the day, you can say what you want about him. He wasn't a great quarterback or he was average. He represented the Raiders and he wasn't afraid to do it. And so, you know, he has a soft spot because I remember so many games about Carr, man. Like, the one that pops out to me is like the Saints game, week one, 2016. Like him diving over defenders to get the first down and clutch comebacks against the Ravens. And, just so many memories from him where it was like the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. And you just, like, I grew an attachment to Carr, man. I don't know how many times I felt like I flipped on Carr, like where he can do so much for you. And Max would agree to this because I think Max was the same way with him. Because it's like you'll see some years and some games and you're like, I'm done. Like, this guy is not made for the moment. This guy doesn't have it. And then he'll show you a game where he just freaking gets you back in there. He gets you back on the train and he's like, I'm here to stay. I'm the guy. And it was just like flip-flopping all the way. But I'm
I
sad to
think
see
that's
him
where
go,
the
man.
discussions I think that's where the discussion starts where you have a guy who's just good enough to make you decent and even beyond decent some years, right? And then you have like the discussion of like, man, this guy really sucks. And I don't think there's a quarterback that did that more than Derek Carr throughout my lifetime. I just feel his success, and I would say this early success, he was fantastic with the Raiders. You know, his first 3 years, I mean, after the rookie year, his second, third, and fourth year, I would say he was a top 10 quarterback in the league. His star was trending up. And I think you as a Raider fan have gotten to see a lot worse quarterbacks take over for him. Desmond Ritter, Jimmy G, you know, even when he was hurt, Matt McGloin. And you also see, damn, like Patrick Mahomes is on a different level than this guy,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like that's where it gets so tough with Derek Carr. Like, hey, he beat Justin Herbert in the Week 17 game where Brandon Staley was trying to sell, where he did sell. He won that game. He played good football. He almost beat Joe Burrow in the playoffs that year. His only playoff game he played in his career. And I just think this is where we'd have to really just as a media, as fans, as people with some type of YouTube channel, whatever, you have to really look at, is this guy good? Is he great? Can he get the job done? Because I don't you like you said, Derek Carr, you flipped and flopped on him like crazy. It was 1 week good, 1 week bad. I'll tell you this one: the last year in Oakland, last year in Vegas, when they benched him,
Right.
did it get better?
No, absolutely not.
Has a quarterback for the Raiders played even a tenth of what he did at his best in your
No.
lifetime?
No, not even close.
See, that's where we talk. Where it's like, man, everyone wants this guy. This guy. It's kind of like he's like the Marvin Lewis of quarterbacks. We're like, man, he's just steady.
Yeah.
Like he was pretty. And you can say, oh, he had bad weeks, good weeks, but he was steady. He was. I would say for the most part of his career for the Oakland or Raiders, he was good. He was
Yeah.
good. It just wasn't good enough. And that's where it gets really tricky when evaluating quarterbacks because I feel like if you put Derek Carr on the Niners, they probably would have won a Super Bowl.
Yeah, and I think a lot of players are like this. You know, I think me and Max are always talking about situations. Like your situation matters. And I think Derek Carr, at the end of the day, when you look at the cards that he was dealt, it was shitty. And he absolutely made the most out of it. Like he got drafted by a team in the Raiders where they were in salary cap hell. They had near almost no talent. Dennis Allen was the head coach who got fired 4 games into Derek Carr's career. Like the Raiders were a mess. And so you can only imagine if Derek Carr went to the Steelers, to the Niners, to the Chiefs when Andy Reid, and it's like how would his career be looked at? Because Derek Carr he had talent. He was able to run. He had a big arm. He was a great processor. He was a great leader. You know, he had those intangibles. But it's like I think for what the Raiders needed, Max, they needed a Patrick Mahomes. They needed a guy who can elevate. And unfortunately, Derek Carr, when it came down to that aspect, I don't think he was a all-time elevator. Like that's what it came down to. And that's what the Raiders
No.
needed. The Raider, it was always bad defenses. It was always like subpar receivers. And it's like the year where he had anything close to that, they won. They won.
Yeah, I mean, people don't remember he almost won MVP. He was third voted, and he was, I would say, one of the front runners. He
He
was
was gonna
behind
win the MVP if he finished the season.
I would think so, and at the level he was playing, like I think he had like 30. Let me look at it right here: 28 touchdowns, 6 interceptions.
And it was all the clutch
The last
stuff.
place, yeah, last placed defense. They're 12-3. This is the turnaround for you're literally 3-13, then 7-9, and you have never tasted a winning record. I think the Raiders' best record for the last 20 years, like 8-8 before the 12-3.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he was he was the face of the turnaround with Khalil Mack. He was the offense. Khalil Mack was the defense. And
Yeah.
this is it's so interesting because there's guys like this now, right? Like, you know, it's funny because Jimmy G has won what, like 8 playoff games,
Yeah.
10.
Yeah.
He's not half the quarterback Derek Carr was in his best, in my opinion. You
Right.
can fight me on that. You can at me and say, "Well, Jimmy G got the job done." Yeah, you won an NFC Championship game and he threw the ball 8 times. Yeah, right. Yeah, really good quarterback.
Yeah.
But this is where we have to just kind of, take a look back and, yeah, is he one of the Raiders' most productive quarterbacks of all time? Yes. Is he? Does that mean he's one of the best? I would say maybe not because arguably, passing stats are inflated nowadays, right?
Yeah.
And Ken Stabler was throwing what, 3,000 yards was a bang up year. Now 3,000 yards, you suck. You don't throw
Right.
for 4,000, 5,000 yards, you suck.
Yeah. And just to conclude it, just on Derek Carr's career as a whole, um, it's just unfortunate how it ended in both ways with New Orleans and with the Raiders. The whole Josh McDaniels thing. I thought they did Carr really dirty, man. He poured so much soul, blood, sweat, and tears for the organization, and I just think the organization never really did the same for him. He was always talked about getting traded about. He was always talked about, are we paying this guy too much money? Oh,
Oh, are the
he's
Raiders going to
hurt
go up in the draft and get somebody to
all
replace
the
this guy?
time.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
never like respected on what Derek Carr was. The only year that he was respected was literally the year after he got hurt. It was just like, oh, we're gonna pay him. He's the guy. He's a young player. That was the most respect he got. After that, it was just downhill from there. It was like, oh, this guy's overpaid. He's not the same player. And so it sucked the way it ended with the Raiders because it's like he wasn't even he wasn't even suiting up. He wasn't even at the games, Max. They told his ass to stay home. Stay home and watch it. We don't even want you around the team.
How different do you think his career like plays out? Because he's in his age 30 season, the last year, 31 season with Gruden when he gets fired for something he wasn't even being like for being like a victim of an investigation. Do you think he plays out different? Do you think he's a Raiders quarterback the next year with Gruden under the, you know?
I would think
Or I'm
so.
sorry,
I would
yeah,
think so.
Gruden gets fired, they make the playoffs, and they hire McDaniels. And McDaniels definitely looking back, and you were telling me about a podcast here where they were just disrespecting Josh Jacobs.
Yeah. Yeah. That whole
How
I think
how,
I
how
think Josh
different is it?
McDaniels I think Josh McDaniels just set back the Raiders, man. It reset the franchise in a big way. Him and
Hey, he
Dave
got half the
Ziegler.
teams in your division effed up. He got the Broncos, he got y'all.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Maybe the
And
Chargers can get him.
I'm not gonna say that Derek Carr would have had this amazing career if Gruden would have stayed or anything like that. I would just say this. There's the biggest what if, and it's literally the year that he got hurt. I'm confident that the Raiders were a team that would at least make it to the AFC Championship that year.
You know, I was gonna say, is it a bigger what if than if Carson Winston tears ACL? But the Eagles win the Super Bowl the year he tears his ACL. The
Exactly.
same year. Is it the
Same
same
year.
year?
Yeah.
Or the year later? I can't
No,
remember.
this is the year that the Raiders that Derek Carr broke his leg. That's Atlanta and New England. That's that year. So they
Yeah,
would have
yeah.
faced New England, and I don't know if they would have beat New England.
Oh yeah, I don't.
But a lot of people forget, like that game would have been in Oakland. We would have had a home playoff game. That's the reality of it. We dropped all the way down. We winded up being a wild card because we lost those 2 games. It was huge after we lost those 2 games. So it's like I'm not gonna sit up here.
Oh, yeah, you did. Yeah, I forgot.
Yeah, because we
No,
were
hold on.
12. I believe we're 12-3 or 12-2, something like
You
that.
were 12-2, I think, when Derek Carr
And the
got hurt.
only
Let me
2
see.
losses that we had was against Kansas City. We lost to them on the road
Atlanta.
and
We lost to
Atlanta. So we're
Atlanta
12 and
off
3.
you were, yeah, he was 12-2. Hold on, I want to just try to look this up. So he was 12-2. He was 12-3 as a starter that year.
Yeah.
You go to win your last game, I think, for the 1 seed or something
Yeah.
weird.
Yeah. If we win the last game, we wind up losing to Denver, and then we have to all of a sudden we go from we're gonna have a home playoff game against Pittsburgh to holy crap, like we're gonna go on the road against Houston.
Yeah.
So
Well, yeah, you would have. Yeah. I mean, New England was 14-2. You were 12-4. Yeah. You dropped the last game of the year,
yep,
and then the Chiefs win the tiebreaker.
yep. So
And the Broncos were not that good that year. They were like 9-7. They were not that good.
yeah. So I think that's the biggest what if. And I think where it comes to that, as far as like the Raiders making it to the AFC championship, I think it changes a lot of things. That's the biggest one because I've never, like, I was talking to this about this stuff with my brother because we're talking about Carr, and I was like, I've never seen a team Max be so shell shocked off one situation like that. That shell shocked, like the whole team from the ground up. Everyone, everyone was done. The
Yeah,
head
and then
coach was done. Everyone
the playoff game was just like, and you don't get your backup. You get your third string guy who's never played,
a
Connor
rookie.
Cook, and just
Yeah,
gets railed.
yeah. So I think that's the biggest what if, and that's the biggest like turning point in Derek Carr's career
I
is
I,
that injury.
I just want to add one more thing. With Carr, with other quarterbacks, you're not appreciated at all. And I think Derek Carr is going to go down as an underappreciated quarterback, especially in Las Vegas/Oakland,
Yeah,
because you've seen the 2 years since he's been gone. If he stayed, it would have been better.
yeah,
And that's the thing with being a quarterback in that tier of quarterback is Derek Carr. You're underappreciated. No one appreciates you until like you really hit rock bottom.
right.
A prime example of that, I think, was kind of like Matt Ryan towards the end, right? Like not MVP Ryan, but those last 2 years, it's kind of like, oh, we're over him. Let's go get a young guy. And you get Desmond Ritter, and you're like, oh, great, that worked. That
Yeah,
100%. Same thing with Baker Mayfield in Cleveland. They were
yeah,
like, you're just not getting it done for us. Like 10-6 sucks. We're never gonna win. How you doing now?
correct.
Big dreams,